7 years. That's how long my brother Marcus and his family lived with me in the Portland home our parents left us. 7 years of shared dinners, movie nights, and me helping raise my niece Zoe while Marcus and Vanessa figured out their careers. 7 years of me paying the majority of the mortgage while working overtime as a film editor so they could chase auditions. 7 years of being the reliable one, the foundation, the safety net. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. And it took them exactly 20 minutes to decide I wasn't worth waiting for when I needed them most. Hollywood won't wait for your recovery, Em, Marcus said, standing in my hospital room with luggage tags already attached to their bags. Could barely focus on his face through the haze of medication. This is our big break. My big break. He was holding my screenplay in his hand. The one I'd spent 3 years perfecting. The one he was now calling our collaboration. When you're better, you can join us, Vanessa added, not quite meeting my eyes. Zoe's already enrolled in a performing arts school there. I remember trying to form words as they walked out, the IV in my arm restricting my movement. But who will? We've left the spare key with Noah next door. He said he'd check in on you. That was it. My family, walking out the door while I fought an autoimmune flare-up that had landed me in the hospital for what would become a 6-week stay. I didn't know then that the screenplay in my brother's hand would become the foundation of his sudden success. I didn't know I would spend the next year relearning how to live alone while managing my condition. And I certainly didn't know that one day Marcus would call me in desperation, needing the very thing he abandoned, family. But that's getting ahead of the story. My name is Emma Wilson. I'm 34 years old, and until 2 years ago, I was just another invisible person in the film industry, an editor who helped other people's visions come to life while my own creative dreams collected dust in desk drawers. I wasn't unhappy exactly. I was good at what I did, cutting together everything from independent documentaries to commercial work. Portland has a vibrant film scene, not Hollywood level, but enough to keep skilled editors employed. When our parents died within 6 months of each other, Dad from a sudden heart attack, Mom from what seemed like a broken heart, they left the house to both Marcus and me. It was a beautiful craftsman-style home in the Selwood neighborhood, too big for just me, but filled with memories I couldn't bear to part with. Marcus was struggling then, picking up small theater roles and commercial work, nothing stable. Vanessa had just had Zoe, and they were drowning in rent for a small apartment. Just until we get established, Marcus had said when I offered them the larger bedroom suite. You're a lifesaver, Em. I didn't mind, not really. After spending all day in dark editing bays, coming home to a lively house felt right. Zoe was a bright spark, growing from a toddler to a clever 9-year-old during their stay. I became Auntie Em, the one who helped with science projects, who explained movie magic, who quietly paid the bills when Marcus's acting checks were delayed. In the evenings, after Zoe went to bed, I'd work on my screenplays. Marcus would sometimes read them, offering suggestions, seemingly supportive. You've got real talent, Em, he'd say. You should do something with these. But there was always a reason not to submit them anywhere. The market wasn't right. I needed more connections. It was better to keep a stable job with my condition. My autoimmune disease, lupus, had been diagnosed in my 20s. Most of the time, I managed it well enough. Regular medication, avoiding triggers, getting enough rest. But stress always made it worse, and with the responsibilities of the house, my job and supporting my brother's family, flare-ups became more frequent. The big one hit after I'd pulled 3 all-nighters finishing a project for a demanding client. I remember the familiar butterfly rash spreading across my face, the joint pain making my fingers too stiff to type, the fever that wouldn't break. Noah, our elderly neighbor who had become a friend, was the one who called the ambulance when he found me collapsed on the front porch, keys fallen from my swollen hands. That's where our story really begins, not with the 7 years of sacrifice, but with the hospital room where everything changed. The doctors called it a severe flare. My kidneys were involved this time, which was dangerous. "You need complete rest," Dr. Patel said, her kind eyes serious above her mask. "No work, no stress, focused treatment. We're talking weeks, possibly months of recovery." I texted Marcus from my hospital bed. "Need to talk. Important." When he and Vanessa arrived, their excitement was palpable, clashing with the sterile, serious atmosphere of the hospital room. They barely asked about my condition before launching into their news. You won't believe what happened," Marcus gushed, pulling a chair close to my bed. "Remember that screenplay we worked on? Portland Rain?" We hadn't worked on it. It was mine. Every word, every scene, every character. Arc. I'd shared it with him for feedback, nothing more, but I was too weak to correct him. A producer read it. A real Hollywood producer. Vanessa's cousin's roommate passed it along. "They love it, Em. They want to make it. And they want me for the lead." "That's great," I managed, my voice raspy. "They need us in LA next week. It's all happening so fast," Vanessa added, bouncing slightly on her toes. "We're packing up now." That's when the reality hit me. "Next week? But I'll still be here, the house." Marcus's face fell slightly, but his eyes remained bright, focused on something I couldn't see. "That's what we need to talk about. We can't pass this up, Em. You understand that, right? It's everything we've been working toward." "Everything you've been working toward," I whispered. Vanessa placed a cold hand on mine. "The doctors say, you'll be here for weeks, maybe longer. Hollywood opportunities don't wait. You know that better than anyone." I did know that. I'd spent years in the industry, watching talented people miss their moment because of timing, circumstance, hesitation. But this was different. This was my work, my family, my home. "You're taking my screenplay?" My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. Marcus had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "We'll credit you as a co-writer, of course, but they're already talking about adaptations, making it more universal. Less Portland, more accessible." "They've offered us a rental to start," Vanessa continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Zoe's already been accepted at this amazing performing arts school. Everything's falling into place. Except me. I wasn't falling into place. I was falling apart. When you're better, you can visit. Maybe even move down if things take off," Marcus added, his tone suggesting he was being generous. "Fresh start, new doctors, and a better climate for your condition." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After 7 years of supporting them, of being the stable one, they were leaving when I needed them most, and taking my creative work with them. "The mortgage," I said, practical even in my shock. "The bills." "We've thought about that," Marcus assured me. "Your disability insurance should cover the medical stuff, right? And for the house, well, you could rent out our rooms while you recover. Or maybe it's time to sell. Mom and Dad would understand." Sell the house, our childhood home, the only place I'd ever felt truly secure. The suggestion hit like a physical blow. "I need to rest," I said finally, turning my face away, unable to look at them anymore. The movement sent pain shooting across my inflamed joints. "Of course," Vanessa said, gathering her purse. "We'll check in once we're settled. Zoe's sad, she couldn't come say goodbye, but she's with the sitter finishing her school withdrawal forms. Goodbye." They had already decided. There was no discussion, no consideration of alternatives, no acknowledgement of what they were taking. From me. Just goodbye. After they left, I lay in that hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily while my world collapsed. Dr. Patel found me an hour later, silent tears streaming down my face. "Emma?" she asked, checking my vitals with a concerned frown. Are you in pain? I can adjust your medication. Yes, I said, but not the kind you can treat. Something in my voice must have conveyed the depth of what had happened, because Dr. Patel pulled up a chair and did something unusual for a busy hospital doctor. She sat down and said, "Tell me." So I did. I told her everything. The house, the screenplay, the years of support, the abrupt abandonment. She listened without interruption, her dark eyes compassionate but increasingly troubled. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked one question that would change everything. "Do you have documentation that the screenplay is yours?" I blinked. "What? Drafts? Notes? Time-stamped files? Anything proving you wrote it?" Through the fog of medication and betrayal, something clicked. Yes, everything's on my laptop at home. Multiple drafts going back years. Emails where I sent it to myself for backup. Dr. Patel nodded decisively. "Your physical health is my primary concern, Emma, but I've seen too many patients deteriorate because their emotional well-being was crushed along with their bodies." She checked her watch. "My shift ends in an hour." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Give me your house key and tell me where to find your laptop. Your neighbor has the spare key, right? I'll bring it tomorrow." "Why would you do that for me?" I asked, bewildered by this unexpected alliance. Her smile was small but determined. "Because before I was a doctor, I was a girl from a large family where my brothers always took credit for my achievements. Let's just say I have a personal interest in making sure your work isn't stolen, even by family." That night, alone in my hospital room, I experienced something strange. A feeling beyond the betrayal and physical pain. A tiny spark of something that felt almost like determination. Marcus might have taken my screenplay and my family support, but he hadn't erased me completely. Not yet. The next day, Dr. Patel arrived with my laptop and a business card. "My brother-in-law is an entertainment lawyer," she explained. "He's agreed to take a preliminary look at your situation pro bono." "I can't afford a lawyer," I said immediately, thinking of the mounting medical bills and mortgage payments looming over me. "Let's worry about that later," she replied. "First, let's establish the facts and your options." Over the next week, as my medical treatment intensified, Dr. Patel became more than my physician. She became my advocate, stopping by after her shifts, sometimes bringing her laptop to sit with me while I documented everything I could remember about my screenplay and Marcus's sudden opportunity. I learned her first name was Amara, that she had 3 brothers who still tried to tell her how to live her life despite her medical degree, and that she had exactly 0 patience for what she called creative theft. "The entertainment industry runs on stolen ideas," she told me one evening, "but usually there's at least the pretense of development and compensation. Not this. Not taking advantage of someone who's literally too sick to defend themselves." My neighbor Noah also became an unexpected ally. At 72, the retired literature professor had a fierce intellect and too much time on his hands. When Amara explained the situation, he took it upon himself to safeguard my house, collecting my mail, forwarding important documents to the hospital, and, most crucially, documenting evidence. "Your brother left quite a paper trail," he informed me during a visit, his silver hair neatly combed as always. Fascinating to watch someone be so duplicitous yet so careless. "There are notes in your shared study with his handwriting suggesting changes to your original work. I've photographed everything." Despite these small victories in documentation, my health deteriorated before it improved. Kidney function became a serious concern. I spent days in a fog of medication and treatments, weeks bleeding into each other. Through it all, I clung to one thought: I would not let everything be taken from me. In my more lucid moments, I worked with Amara's brother-in-law, James Park, the entertainment lawyer who had indeed taken my case without upfront payment. I'm fascinated by the audacity, he admitted during our first video call from my hospital bed. Your brother has no prior screenwriting credits, yet suddenly he's developed this fully formed screenplay that's generating buzz? The timeline alone raises red flags. But isn't it just his word against mine? I asked. Family disputes are messy. James's smile was tight. Normally, yes, but creative work leaves fingerprints, Emma. Digital timestamps, draft histories, your detailed notes and development process. The fact that your brother can't produce similar documentation will matter. I didn't know whether to believe him. Hollywood seemed like a world where truth was malleable, where stories were currency, and where my brother, charming, handsome, persuasive Marcus, would naturally thrive. 6 weeks after I entered the hospital, I was finally discharged. Noah picked me up in his meticulously maintained vintage Volvo. Welcome back to the land of the living, he said, helping me navigate from wheelchair to passenger seat, my body still weak and my movements tentative. The house felt eerily silent when we arrived. Despite Noah's care, a thin layer of dust covered surfaces, and the absence of Marcus, Vanessa, and Zoe was palpable. Their rooms had been hastily cleared, leaving bare spots on walls where photos had hung and empty drawers pulled half open. They took some things that weren't theirs, Noah said carefully, watching my face. Electronics, mostly. I've documented it all. I nodded, too exhausted by the short trip to feel new anger. Thank you for everything, Noah. You'd have done the same, he replied simply. That's what real neighbors do. They don't abandon ship when waters get rough. The recovery at home was harder than the hospital stay in many ways. Physical therapy, medication schedules, learning to pace myself, through basic tasks. I couldn't return to work yet, and my savings were dwindling fast between medical expenses and the mortgage. Marcus called exactly once during those early weeks home. The conversation was brief and surreal. How's the screenplay coming along? I asked, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. Great! They love it. We're making some changes, of course, setting it in LA now, not Portland. More commercial. His voice was bright, energetic in a way I hadn't heard in years. Listen, I should have called sooner. It's been crazy here. Meetings, auditions, networking. And my credit, as the actual writer? A pause. We're still working that out. These contracts are complicated. But don't worry. Once I'm established, I'll have more leverage to bring you in. How generous of you, I said flatly. Are you feeling better? Vanessa and I were thinking maybe you could visit once you're up for traveling. Zoe misses you. The casual audacity stole my breath. I miss her too, but I'm focused on not losing my house right now. Another pause. About that. Have you considered what I said about selling? Property values in your neighborhood are way up. You could pay off your medical bills, maybe get a smaller place that's easier to manage with your condition. My condition? As if lupus defined me. As if I needed to shrink my life to accommodate an illness while he expanded his on the back of my work. I'm not selling, I said with finality. And Marcus? Don't call again unless you're ready to tell the truth about who wrote Portland Rain, or LA Sunshine, or whatever you're calling it now. I hung up before he could respond. That night, I cried for the first time since leaving the hospital, not from physical pain or fear, but from a deep, clarifying anger that somehow felt like progress. I was done being the reliable, compliant one. Done putting my needs last. The next morning, I called James Park. I'm ready, I said when he answered. Whatever it takes to protect my work and get proper credit. Good, he replied, because your brother just signed a 3-picture deal based on characters from your screenplay. The timing couldn't be better. And that's when the real fight began. The entertainment lawyer's office was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of sleek glass and chrome, James Park worked from a converted Victorian in downtown Portland with creaking hardwood floors and built-in bookshelves. His assistant, a gray-haired woman named Dolores, greeted me with a gentle handshake, mindful of my still sensitive joints. "He's ready for you," she said, guiding me down a hallway lined with framed movie posters, all independent films I recognized, many I'd admired. "Can I get you some tea? You look like you could use it." I nodded gratefully, still adjusting to the fatigue that followed me everywhere now, a constant reminder of my body's betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me. Betrayed by my immune system. Betrayed by my family, all at once. James stood when I entered, coming around his desk to help me into a chair. "Emma, good to finally meet in person. How was the drive over?" "Noah insisted on bringing me," I admitted. "I'm not cleared to drive yet." Smart man. James settled back behind his desk, where stacks of paper were arranged in neat piles. "I like thorough people. That's why I think we're going to work well together." He opened a folder and removed a small stack of papers, sliding them across to me. "Do you recognize these?" I glanced down and felt my breath catch. Email printouts, dated 3 years earlier, messages I'd sent to various friends and mentors, attaching early drafts of my screenplay, my name in the signature line, my words in the attached documents. "Yes," I said, "these are mine." "And these?" He slid over another set, screenshots of file directories showing creation dates, modification logs, tracked changes from my original word processor. "Also mine." My voice sounded stronger now. James nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "One more." He pushed a final paper toward me. It was a printout of an industry news item, dated just 2 weeks ago. The headline read, "Newcomer Marcus Wilson lands 3-picture deal after spec script bidding war." The brief article praised Marcus as a fresh voice and mentioned his unique perspective on Northwest life transplanted to the Hollywood scene. It described his screenplay as a semi-autobiographical story of siblings navigating grief, ambition, and loyalty in the shadow of parental loss. My story, my grief, my words. "I've seen enough theft cases to last a lifetime," James said, watching me read, "but rarely something this blatant from a family member." I looked up, anger and hurt competing for dominance. "What can we actually do?" "He's already there. The deals are signed. Production is probably starting soon." James leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Do you want the aggressive approach or the strategic one?" "What's the difference?" "Aggressive means we file formal complaints immediately. Copyright infringement, cease and desist letters to the production company, public statements about theft of intellectual property. It creates noise, draws attention." "And strategic?" His expression softened slightly. "We gather more evidence, approach the production company privately with our documentation, and offer them a solution that doesn't involve public embarrassment or production delays." I considered his words carefully. "What would that solution look like?" "Full writing credit to you, appropriate compensation, and a public acknowledgement of your work, framed however they want, collaborative siblings, family writing team, whatever spin minimizes their embarrassment." "And if they refuse?" "Then we go aggressive, with the advantage of having tried the reasonable approach first." Outside, rain had started to fall against the windows, the familiar Portland percussion that had inspired so many scenes in my screenplay, scenes now being rewritten by strangers, relocated to sunny Los Angeles backlots. "What would you do?" I asked finally. James smiled, a quick flash of teeth that reminded me this man negotiated with entertainment executives for a living. "I'd go strategic. Not because it's nicer to your brother. Frankly, I think he deserves whatever consequences come his way, but because it's more likely to get you what you truly want." "Which is?" "Recognition for your work, financial security, and the chance to write again, with legitimate industry contacts who know your name. He was right. As much as part of me wanted to watch Marcus squirm publicly, wanted Vanessa to face her friends knowing what they'd done, revenge wasn't my true goal. I wanted my life back. Not just the life before they left, but the life I could have had if my work had been recognized properly. Strategic, I agreed. But I want one thing understood from the beginning. I'm not protecting Marcus. I'm protecting my work. James nodded approvingly. That's the right focus. Now, let's talk about next steps. Over the next hour, we outlined a plan. First, documentation. Every shred of evidence that the screenplay originated with me. Next, a carefully crafted letter to the production company's legal department, presenting our case without accusing them of deliberate wrongdoing. Finally, a proposed resolution that would allow production to continue while correcting the fundamental injustice. The key is to make it easier for them to work with us than against us, James explained. They've invested in your story because it's good. Our job is to show them that properly crediting and compensating the actual author is their cleanest path forward. As our meeting concluded, Dolores appeared with a fresh cup of tea and a business card. "This is my direct line," she said, handing me the card. "Any questions, any time. We've helped writers in similar situations before." Something in her knowing gaze made me ask, "Recently?" She glanced at James, who gave a slight nod. "Last year," she confirmed. "A young woman whose college roommate sold her novel concept to a publisher claiming it was her own. We settled favorably. The validation that I wasn't alone, that others had faced similar betrayals and prevailed, lightened. Something in my chest. I'd spent weeks feeling isolated in my anger, questioning whether I was overreacting, wondering if family loyalty should outweigh my sense of injustice. "Thank you," I said, meaning it deeply. Noah was waiting outside in his Volvo, reading glasses, perched on his nose as he worked through a dog-eared paperback. He marked his place carefully as I approached. "Productive meeting?" he asked, starting the car. "Yes," I said. "I think so." He glanced at me sideways. "You look different." "Different how?" "Less hunched. Like you've set down something heavy." I realized he was right. For the first time since the hospital, I wasn't carrying the entire weight of betrayal alone. I had allies now. James with his strategic mind, Amara with her fierce advocacy, Noah with his quiet, unwavering support, and most importantly, I had a plan. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of recovery milestones and legal preparations. My physical therapy sessions left me exhausted but incrementally stronger. The medical bills continued to arrive, each one more staggering than the last. My disability insurance covered a portion, but not nearly enough. Yet alongside the challenges, small victories emerged. James compiled a comprehensive evidence packet demonstrating my authorship. Amara introduced me to a support group for chronic illness patients, where I finally found people who understood the complex grief of adjusting to a body in revolt. Noah helped me set up a home office in the sunroom, where morning light could reach me as I slowly began editing freelance projects again. The house still felt too empty sometimes, especially in the evenings when I could almost hear the echo of Zoe's laughter. But it was becoming mine again, not a space defined by absence. Then, exactly 18 days after our initial meeting, James called. "We got a response," he said without preamble. "They want to meet." My heart hammered. "The production company? All ready?" "Better. The executive producer herself, Diane Reynolds. She's flying up from LA tomorrow specifically to discuss this situation." "Tomorrow?" Panic fluttered in my chest. "I'm not ready. I don't look professional." It was a ridiculous concern given the circumstances, but suddenly I was acutely aware of my still too thin frame, my hair that had thinned during treatment, the butterfly rash that hadn't completely faded. James's voice softened. "Emma, she's Coming to you because she takes this seriously. Her office specifically requested we meet somewhere comfortable for you, given your health considerations. My house? The thought of these Hollywood people seeing my modest home, judging the faded furniture and worn carpets, sent another wave of anxiety through me. I suggested my office, actually. Neutral ground. Is that workable for you? I breathed easier. Yes, thank you. One more thing, James said. Marcus doesn't know about this meeting. That caught me by surprise. How is that possible? He's the supposed writer. Interesting, isn't it? I could hear the smile in James's voice. Apparently, Ms. Reynolds wants all the facts before involving him further. I think our evidence packet made quite an impression. After we hung up, I sat in the sunroom for a long time, watching raindrops trace patterns down the glass. The meeting tomorrow could change everything: my financial future, my professional standing, my relationship with Marcus. I called Amara, needing a friend's perspective. She answered on the third ring, the sounds of the hospital audible in the background. The producer wants to meet, I said without greeting. Tomorrow. That's fantastic. Her enthusiasm was immediate. What are you going to wear? The question was so refreshingly normal, so removed from legal strategies and medical concerns, that I laughed for what felt like the first time in months. I have no idea. My nice clothes don't fit anymore. I'm off at 7. I'll bring takeout. And we'll figure it out, she promised. This is a big moment, Emma. You deserve to feel confident. That evening, Amara arrived with Thai food and determined energy. We spread outfit options across my bed, the few professional items that still hung properly on my frame, accessories that might add polish, shoes I could manage with my still tender joints. This isn't about vanity, Amara insisted when I expressed embarrassment at focusing on appearance. It's about presenting yourself as the professional you are. This producer needs to see you as the screenwriter, not just the sick woman Marcus abandoned. She was right, of course. So much of this battle was about perception, how Marcus had presented himself, how the industry viewed the screenplay, how I needed to be seen now. We settled on a structured blazer that disguised my weight loss, a silk scarf that added color while covering the fading rash, and simple black pants with forgiving stretch. Professional but comfortable enough to get through what might be a difficult meeting. Perfect, Amara declared, stepping back to assess the result. Creative but serious. I hugged her impulsively. Thank you. For everything. She returned the embrace carefully, mindful of my sensitive joints. This is just the beginning. Emma, tomorrow you start reclaiming your story. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake replaying possible scenarios, imagining what this Diane Reynolds would be like, wondering if she'd already decided against me regardless of evidence. Hollywood ran on relationships, and Marcus was there, charming in person, while I was just paperwork and claims from afar. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. Noah drove me to James's office, offering quiet encouragement. Remember, you're the wronged party here. You have nothing to be nervous about. We arrived early, which gave James time to brief me on what he'd learned about Diane Reynolds. She's respected in the industry, started as a script supervisor, worked her way up. She has a reputation for being tough but fair, and she's particularly known for championing female creators. That last bit offered a glimmer of hope. Perhaps she would understand what it meant to have your work attributed to someone else, to be made invisible in your own creative life. At precisely 10 a.m., Dolores showed Diane Reynolds into the conference room. She wasn't what I expected. Instead of Hollywood flash, she wore a simple black dress and minimal jewelry. Her salt and pepper hair was cut in a practical bob, and she carried a leather portfolio rather than a designer handbag. She looked more like a university professor than a Hollywood power player. Ms. Wilson, she said, extending her hand to me first, not James. Thank you for meeting with me. I know this can't be easy for you. Her directness was disarming. Thank you for coming all this way, I managed. We settled around the conference table. I noticed she didn't bring an entourage of assistants or lawyers, just herself and the portfolio. I'd like to start by saying that I've read all the documentation your attorney provided, she began, opening the portfolio to reveal a neatly organized copy of our evidence packet, with sections tabbed and highlighted. I've also read every draft of the screenplay Portland Rain that we received from Marcus Wilson, as well as the original material you provided. Her gaze was steady, evaluating. I have some questions, if you don't mind. For the next hour, she asked about my writing process, specific scenes and character choices, the autobiographical elements woven throughout. She listened intently to my answers, occasionally making notes, nodding at particular insights. The relationship between the siblings in your screenplay, she said at one point. It's complex. Loving, but with undercurrents of resentment, competition. Is that drawn from your relationship with Marcus? The question hit close to home. Yes and no, I admitted. I love my brother, but there's always been this dynamic where he takes center stage while I support from the wings. I wrote what I knew. Something flickered in her expression. Recognition, perhaps. And the final scene, where the sister finally confronts her. Brother about living in her shadow? That's particularly powerful. It's what I wish I'd said years ago, I confessed. Writing let me have the conversation I was too afraid to have in real life. Diane closed her portfolio decisively. Ms. Wilson, Emma, I'm going to be very direct with you. The screenplay we purchased is excellent. It's nuanced, authentic, emotional, without being sentimental. It's why we bought it, why we committed to developing 3 films based on these characters. She paused, her expression grave. It's also unquestionably your work, not your brother's. The validation was so sudden, so complete, that I felt tears spring to my eyes. James reached over and squeezed my hand briefly. The timestamps, the draft progression, the consistent voice throughout early versions. It's all clear, Diane continued. What's less clear is how to proceed from here. What do you mean? I asked, finding my voice. We've invested significantly in development already. Pre-production has begun. Your brother has been involved in readings, meetings, casting discussions. She sighed. The project is moving forward on the strength of your writing, but with his face attached to it. James leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Reynolds? She looked directly at me, not him. I want to offer you full writing credit. Appropriate compensation including back pay for all development work to date, and a first-look deal for future projects. My breath caught. It was more than we'd dared hope for in our strategic approach. And Marcus? I asked. A slight grimace crossed her features. That's complicated. Legally, we can remove him entirely. Practically, he's become entangled in the project. The compromise I'm proposing is to credit him as a story consultant, make it clear you are the screenwriter, and manage the transition carefully for publicity purposes. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was realistic. And it centered my work rather than his deception. There's one more thing, Diane added. I'd like you to come to Los Angeles. Not permanently, but for key phases of production. Your voice should be part of bringing this story to screen properly. The offer was unexpected. After months of being confined to my house and hospital rooms, the thought of traveling to Los Angeles, of being directly involved in the filmmaking process, was both exhilarating and terrifying. My health, I began, uncertainty leaking into my voice. We would accommodate your medical needs, she assured me. Private transportation, flexible scheduling, comfortable accommodations. I understand your condition requires management. James spoke up. We'd need all of this in writing, of course. Detailed terms, credit guarantees, compensation schedules. Absolutely, Diane agreed. I'm prepared to have preliminary paperwork drawn up by the end of the week. The meeting continued for another half hour, discussing specifics and contingencies. Throughout, Diane remained focused and direct, treating me with a respect that felt healing after months of dismissal, first from Marcus, then from my own body. As we concluded, she addressed the elephant in the room. I will need to speak with your brother. Today, ideally. How would you prefer we handle that? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't considered that she would consult me about approaching Marcus. I don't want to be there, I said immediately. Then, after a moment's thought, but I'd like to know what happens. She nodded understanding. Fair enough. I'll update you afterward. As she gathered her things to leave, she paused. Emma, I hope you don't mind my asking, but have you written anything new during your recovery? Bits and pieces, I admitted. Nothing complete. She smiled for the first time, a genuine expression that transformed her professional demeanor. When you do, I want to read it first. After she left, I slumped in my chair, emotional exhaustion washing over me. Did that really just happen? James looked as stunned as I felt. In 15 years of entertainment law, I've never seen an executive of her level personally intervene like this. She could have sent lawyers, made a token settlement offer. He shook his head in amazement. She believes in your work, Emma. Noah, who had waited patiently in the reception area, drove me home afterward. I told him everything, the words tumbling out in an emotional rush. I knew it, he said simply. Talent and truth win eventually. At home, I collapsed on my couch. My body reminded me that I was still recovering, still adjusting to my new limitations. The emotional high of vindication couldn't override the physical reality of chronic illness. I texted Amara the news, then closed my eyes, allowing myself to rest in the knowledge that my work, my voice, would finally be recognized. The call from Diane came 3 hours later. I've spoken with your brother, she said without preamble. How did he take it? My stomach knotted with anxiety. Initially, not well. Her tone was measured. He denied everything, claimed you, were jealous of his success, suggested your illness had affected your memory of who wrote what. The familiar pain of betrayal twisted sharper. And then? Then I showed him the evidence, the timestamps, the editor's notes in your handwriting on early drafts, the consistent voice across versions that changed dramatically once our team began working with him. I could almost see Marcus's face, the stubborn denial giving way to realization that he'd been caught. What did he say? I whispered. He cried, Diane said simply. Then he admitted everything. How he'd found your completed screenplay while you were hospitalized. How he'd convinced himself he was doing you a favor by getting it into the right hands. How one lie led to another until he was trapped in his own deception. I closed my eyes, picturing my brother, always charming, always the center of attention, finally facing consequences. Will you still use him as a story consultant? No. Her answer was immediate. That offer was contingent on his cooperation and honesty. We'll credit you as the sole writer. He's out of the creative process entirely. A complicated mix of emotions swept through me, relief, vindication, and an unexpected thread of sadness for what might have been if Marcus had chosen differently. There's something else you should know, Diane continued. Your screenplay, your original vision, set in Portland, not the revised LA version, is what we're returning to. It's stronger, more authentic. We're recommitting to your story as you wrote it. By the time we hung up, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my living room. I sat in the growing darkness, processing everything. Years of writing. In stolen moments between editing jobs, months of illness and betrayal, weeks of fighting to reclaim my work, all culminating in this moment of unexpected justice. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Amara on my porch, a bottle of champagne in one hand and a container of soup in the other. "Noah called me," she explained, stepping inside. "Said you might need company to process everything." "I don't know if I should celebrate or collapse," I admitted. She set the items on the coffee table. "You can do both. The soup is for nourishment. The champagne is for toasting. Both are forms of self-care tonight." We settled on the couch, me wrapped in a blanket despite the mild evening temperature, another accommodation to my body's new reality. "To justice," Amara said, raising her glass once we'd each poured a small amount. "And to new beginnings." New beginnings, I echoed, the concept still strange after months of simply trying to survive each day. Later, after Amara left, I opened my laptop for the first time in days. The blank document stared back at me, cursor blinking expectantly. I placed my fingers on the keyboard and began to type, slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. Not a screenplay this time, something different, a personal essay about illness, betrayal, and reclamation. About how sometimes losing everything you thought mattered reveals what truly does. About how justice doesn't always look like you imagined, but can be sweeter for its imperfection. I wrote until my hands ached and my eyes grew heavy, pouring truth onto the page without fear or restraint. When I finally stopped, dawn was breaking over Portland, gray light filtering through the windows. I saved the document, closed my laptop, and slept more peacefully than I had in months. 2 days later, the preliminary paperwork arrived from Diane's legal team. Every promise had been formalized: writing credit, compensation, involvement in the production process. James reviewed it meticulously, suggesting minor adjustments but confirming it was a remarkably favorable agreement. "You should be proud," he said when I signed the final version. "Not just of winning the case, but of creating something worth fighting for in the first place." As the documents were couriered back to Los Angeles, I felt a chapter closing. Not the entire story, but a significant part of it. The betrayal would always be part of my history with Marcus, but it would no longer define my future. That evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Vanessa. We need to talk." I stared at the text message from Vanessa for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. After everything that had happened, what could she possibly want to talk about? Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, to continue forward, with my newly reclaimed future, without looking back at the people who had abandoned me. But curiosity, or perhaps some lingering attachment to the family that had been mine for 7 years, made me respond. "What about?" 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, reappeared, vanished again. Finally, her message came through. "Marcus is falling apart. The studio is cutting him out completely. He might lose everything. Can we talk in person?" The irony wasn't lost on me. Falling apart. Losing everything. The very circumstances they'd left me in. Only now it was happening to them because of their own actions, not because of an illness beyond their control. "I'm not in LA," I typed, back, a simple fact that carried the weight of all they had missed. My difficult recovery, my gradual return to work, my fight for justice. "We know. We're in Portland, at the airport hotel." My heart lurched uncomfortably. They were here? Just miles away after months of silence broken only by Marcus's self-serving phone call? "Why?" I asked, the single word encompassing all my confusion and suspicion. This time her response came quickly. "The studio sent Marcus home. Said they didn't want him representing the project anymore. We didn't know where else to go." I could almost picture Vanessa as she typed this, her carefully manicured nails, her practiced expression of concern that never quite reached her eyes. She had always been Marcus's perfect complement, as focused on appearance and social positioning as he was on charm and creative ambition. They had made an effective team, climbing together on the ladder of my support. I set the phone down without responding and called Amara. "They're in Portland," I said when she answered. "Vanessa just texted. They want to meet." "Absolutely not," Amara replied immediately. "Not alone, anyway, not without understanding their agenda first." "She says Marcus is falling apart. That the studio sent him home." Amara's snort was distinctly unsympathetic. "Actions have consequences. He stole your work, Emma. He abandoned you when you were critically ill. This isn't your problem to fix." She was right, of course. There was no obligation for me to help them navigate the aftermath of their own choices. But something tugged at me. Not guilt or misplaced loyalty, but a desire for closure, for a conversation that wasn't filtered through lawyers or Hollywood executives. "I think I need to see them," I said slowly. "Not to help, but I don't know, to see it through, I guess." Amara was quiet for a moment. "If you're determined to do this, don't go alone, and meet somewhere public, not at your house or their hotel. Somewhere you can leave easily if it gets too intense." "Will you come with me?" The question came out smaller than I intended. "Of course," she said without hesitation. "What are friends for if not to provide backup when your manipulative ex-family resurfaces?" I texted Vanessa back. "I'll meet you tomorrow. Raindrop Cafe on Hawthorne. 11 a.m. I'm bringing a friend." I didn't elaborate on who the friend was or why I needed one. Let them wonder for once about what to expect. That night, sleep eluded. Me again. I tossed in bed, imagining different versions of the coming confrontation. Would Marcus be truly remorseful or just sorry he got caught? Would Vanessa take responsibility for her part in the betrayal or cast herself as an innocent bystander? And what about Zoe? Was she with them? The thought of seeing my niece again after all these months both lifted and constricted my heart. By morning, I was exhausted, but resolved. I dressed carefully, not in the professional outfit I'd worn to meet Diane, but in clothes that made me feel strong. My favorite jeans, now fitting slightly looser than before, a soft burgundy sweater that brought color to my still pale face, comfortable ankle boots that wouldn't strain my sensitive joints. Amara picked me up precisely at 10:40, dressed in her non-hospital clothes, tailored black pants and an emerald blouse that complemented her deep brown skin. She looked formidable and protective, exactly the ally I needed. "You're sure about this?" she asked as we pulled into the cafe parking lot. I nodded. "I need to see them face to face, to know I've truly moved beyond what they did." The Raindrop Cafe was my territory, a cozy Portland institution with mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and the persistent smell of good coffee and baking bread. I'd spent countless hours there working on my screenplays, including Portland Rain. It felt fitting to confront Marcus and Vanessa in a place so connected to the creative work they had tried to steal. We arrived first and selected a table in the corner, private enough for conversation but public enough that I wouldn't feel trapped. I ordered herbal tea, still avoiding caffeine per my doctor's recommendations, while Amara got a cappuccino that she positioned protectively between her hands like a shield. They arrived 7 minutes late. Marcus first through the door, scanning the room with the studied casualness of someone used to being recognized, followed by Vanessa, stylish despite evident travel fatigue. No Zoe. The disappointment was sharper than I expected. Marcus spotted me and froze momentarily, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, uncertainty, and something that might have been shame before settling into a careful neutrality. Vanessa nudged him forward with a light touch to his lower back, her social poise never faltering. "Emma," Marcus said as they reached our table. His voice was softer than I remembered, the confident projection diminished. "You look alive?" I supplied when he trailed off. "Despite being abandoned in a hospital?" He winced visibly. I was going to say, well, you look well. Vanessa extended her hand toward Amara, smoothly redirecting the tension. I'm Vanessa Wilson, Emma's sister-in-law, and you are… Dr. Amara Patel, she replied, shaking the offered hand briefly. Emma's friend and physician. A flicker of discomfort crossed Vanessa's perfect features at the word physician, a reminder of the medical crisis they had fled. Good. Let them be uncomfortable. They settled into the chairs across from us, Marcus slumping slightly while Vanessa maintained impeccable posture. Up close, I could see the toll recent events had taken. Marcus's eyes were shadowed by dark circles, his usual meticulous appearance rumpled. Vanessa looked polished but brittle, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Thank you for meeting us, Vanessa began, assuming her familiar role as Marcus's spokesperson. We know it couldn't have been easy after everything. Everything? I repeated. You mean after you took my screenplay, claimed it as Marcus's work, left me alone during a major health crisis, and tried to pressure me into selling my home? Marcus flinched. Emma, please. I know I messed up. Badly. Messed up? I echoed, incredulous. That's what you call it? What Marcus means, Vanessa interjected smoothly, is that things spiraled in ways we never intended. It all happened so fast. The opportunity, the move, the studio's interest. None of which would have existed without my work, I said flatly. Work Marcus stole. Marcus looked down at the table, unable to meet my gaze. I know what I did. His voice was barely audible above the cafe's ambient noise. I've lost everything because of it. Everything? I asked again, anger flaring hot and sudden. You mean like I lost everything? My health, my security, my family, all at once? Amara placed a gentle hand on my arm, a reminder to protect my own energy. I took a deep breath, centering myself. What exactly do you want from me? I asked finally. Why are you here? Vanessa glanced at Marcus, who seemed unable to speak. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. The studio has completely removed Marcus from the project. They're refusing to honor any part of his contract due to fraudulent representation. Their words. Our lawyer says they're within their rights. They are, I confirmed. And we're… She hesitated, visibly struggling with the next words. We're in trouble, Emma. Financial trouble. The lease on the L.A. apartment required a huge deposit. Zoe's school needs the rest of the year's tuition. We've spent months living as if the movie deal money was certain. The picture became clearer. So, you came back to Portland because you can't afford L.A. anymore. And you contacted me because… Marcus finally looked up, his expression raw. Because I need to make this right. Somehow. I studied him. My brother, my childhood playmate, the person who had once known me better than anyone. There was genuine anguish in his face. But was it remorse for what he'd done to me? Or just distress at the consequences he now faced? Where's Zoe? I asked, the question that had been pressing on my heart since they arrived without her. With Vanessa's sister in Seattle, Marcus replied. We thought it best until we figure things out. She misses you, asks about you all the time. The mention of my niece softened something in me, but I remained wary. You still haven't explained what you want from me. Vanessa and Marcus exchanged a look. Then Vanessa reached into her purse and removed a folded document, placing it on the table between us. We wanted to give you this, she said. It's the deed to the house. Marcus is signing over his half to you, completely. No strings attached. I stared at the document, stunned. The house had been left equally to Marcus and me by our parents, while I had been the one maintaining it, paying the mortgage, living there consistently. His legal claim to half had remained intact even after he left. Why? I managed to ask. Because it's yours, Marcus said simply. It's always been more yours than mine. You made it a home. You kept it going when I was chasing auditions and scripts. You paid for it while I contributed what I could, when I could. I glanced at Amara, who was examining the document with professional scrutiny. She gave me a small nod. It appeared legitimate. This doesn't erase what happened, I said carefully. We know that, Vanessa responded. It's not meant to. It's just a beginning, an acknowledgement. And what about you? Where will you live? Despite everything, I couldn't help asking. Marcus sighed heavily. We're staying with friends for now. Looking for jobs here again. Starting over, I guess. The irony was almost too perfect. Them rebuilding from scratch while I had secured my future. But there was no satisfaction in seeing them humbled like this, only a complicated grief for what might have been if different choices had been made. And Zoe? I pressed. What happens with her? She'll come back once we're settled, Vanessa said quickly. Vanessa's sister has been amazing, but it's temporary. Zoe needs stability. Yes, I agreed pointedly. She does. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I studied the deed, tracing my finger over Marcus's signature already inked at the bottom. A peace offering? Restitution? Or simply the only thing of value he had left to give? Thank you for this, I said finally, folding the document carefully. I'll have my attorney review it, but I appreciate the gesture. Marcus nodded, visible relief washing over his features. There's something else. The studio, they want you to come to LA next month. For pre-production meetings. No, I said. Diane Reynolds and I have been in regular communication. His eyes widened slightly. Oh, right, of course. He cleared his throat. I wanted to say, your screenplay is brilliant, Emma. It always was. I should have helped you submit it properly, not done what I did. The admission, the acknowledgement of my talent that had been buried under years of his ambition, struck deeper than I expected. A compliment from my brother had always been the thing I craved most, even as I pretended not to need his approval. I've been writing again, I heard myself saying, unsure why I was sharing this with them. New things, different stories. That's great, Marcus said, genuine enthusiasm briefly lighting his exhausted face. Really great, Em. The childhood nickname slipped out naturally, and for a moment, I glimpsed the brother I had loved, the relationship that had once mattered before. Ambition and betrayal had corroded it. Amara checked her watch discreetly, our prearranged signal for an exit if needed. I gave her a small nod, ready to conclude this unexpected reunion. I should go, I said, gathering my purse. I have physical therapy this afternoon. Marcus started to reach across the table, then hesitated, pulling his hand back. Would it be possible to meet again? Maybe with Zoe when she visits. She really does miss you. I thought of my niece, not biologically related to me, but family in all the ways that mattered. The innocent in all of this. Yes, I said. I'd like that. But Marcus, Vanessa, I'm not ready to forget what happened. I don't know if I ever will be. We understand, Vanessa said quietly. We're not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to make amends somehow. As Amara and I stood to leave, Marcus spoke again, his voice catching. Emma, I am sorry. For everything. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that. I looked at my brother, truly looked at him, beyond the anger and hurt that had colored my perception for months. He was diminished somehow, the confident charm replaced by genuine remorse. Not just for being caught, I realized, but for the damage he had caused. I know, I said simply. Then Amara and I walked out of the cafe into the gentle Portland rain, leaving Marcus and Vanessa at the table with their empty coffee cups and uncertain future. In the car, Amara waited until we were pulling out of the parking lot before speaking. "Are you okay?" I considered the question carefully. "I think so. It was different than I expected." "The house deed is a significant gesture," she observed, "financially and symbolically." "Yes," I agreed. "I just don't know if it's enough." "Enough for what?" "To rebuild anything with them, to trust them again." Amara navigated through traffic thoughtfully. "That's not a decision you need to make today, or even this month. Healing, physical or emotional, isn't linear. You're allowed to take time to figure out what you want this relationship to be going forward." Her words settled over me like a blanket, warm and comforting. The pressure to resolve everything immediately eased. I had time to heal, time to write, time to decide what family meant to me now. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. With my health continuing to improve gradually, I focused on two parallel tracks: my ongoing recovery and the upcoming trip to Los Angeles. The first required discipline, medications, therapy, careful monitoring of my symptoms. The second sparked a creativity and excitement I hadn't felt in months. Diane Reynolds called regularly with updates, treating me with the professional respect I'd always craved. We discussed character motivations, location scouting in Portland, potential directors. She sent me revised drafts that restored my original vision while enhancing it with the resources only a major studio could provide. "We're keeping the original title," she informed me during one call. "Portland Rain captures the mood perfectly. Our marketing team tried to change it to something more generic, but I pulled rank." "Thank you," I said, meaning it deeply. The title had been the first thing I'd written, before even outlining the story. It had emerged whole from some inner truth about the city I loved and the emotions tangled within it. "The production designers want to consult with you about specific locations," Diane continued. "They're compiling options, but they want your input on which places capture the authentic Portland you envisioned." This new reality, where my creative input was not just welcomed but actively sought, still felt surreal sometimes. For years I had been the invisible assistant helping others realize their visions. Now my vision was central, my voice amplified rather than muted. Noah helped me prepare for the LA trip with practical assistance, researching disability accommodations at hotels, connecting me with a colleague in California who could recommend medical resources if needed, helping me organize my medications and treatment schedule for travel. "You'll want comfortable clothes for the flight," he advised, taking his role as travel consultant seriously. "And compression socks. They help with circulation." His genuine concern touched me deeply. In the absence of my biological family, Noah and Amara had become something equally valuable: chosen family, supporting me not out of obligation but out of genuine care. The night before my scheduled departure, I sat alone in the sunroom, now fully my own thanks to Marcus's signed deed, and tried to process how dramatically life had changed in just a few months. From being abandoned and betrayed to reclaiming my work, securing my home, and preparing to help bring my screenplay to life. It was a transformation I could never have imagined during those dark days in the hospital. My phone buzzed with a message from a number I now recognized as Vanessa's. "Zoe's coming to Portland this weekend. She's been asking when she can see you. Would Sunday work?" The prospect of reuniting with my niece filled me with bittersweet anticipation. I missed her terribly. Her curious questions, her enthusiastic hugs, her unfiltered observations about life. But I also feared the awkwardness that might come with our changed circumstances, the explanations she might need about what had happened between the adults in her life. "Sunday afternoon would be perfect," I replied after careful consideration. "I'll be back from LA by then." Vanessa's response came quickly. "LA? For the movie? Yes, pre-production meetings. I kept it brief, not elaborating on the role I would play or how excited I was feeling. That's wonderful, Emma. Truly. I'm glad they're including you properly. Her response seemed genuine, but I remained cautious. Vanessa had always been skilled at saying the right thing while serving her own interests. Was this new supportiveness real, or just another adaptation to changed circumstances? I set the phone aside, turning my attention to packing for tomorrow's trip. The suitcase open on my bed seemed symbolic somehow, a vessel for possibility, for new experiences. I had spent so long in survival mode, focused only on getting through each day, that the concept of future plans still felt novel. The packing process was methodical, soothing in its practicality. Medications organized in labeled containers, comfortable clothes that allowed for the unpredictable swelling of my joints, the notebook where I'd been jotting ideas for my next screenplay. A framed photo of my parents that had always sat on my desk, their smiling faces a reminder of the creative legacy that ran through our family, through both Marcus and me. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if my parents would have been disappointed in Marcus's actions, or if they would have focused instead on the possibility of reconciliation. They had always emphasized forgiveness within the family, the importance of bonds that transcended mistakes, but they had also valued honesty and integrity above all. Would they have seen Marcus's betrayal as something unforgivable, or as a terrible mistake made by a flawed son? I had no answers, only the quiet certainty that they would have been proud of me, not just for the professional recognition, but for surviving, for fighting, for refusing to be erased. The morning of my departure dawned clear and crisp. Portland, showing its autumn beauty as if bidding me a temporary farewell. Noah arrived punctually to drive me to the airport, my suitcase carefully stowed in his trunk. Nervous? He asked as we navigated the morning traffic. A little, I admitted, but good nervous, excited nervous. He nodded approvingly. That's the best kind, means you're growing. At the airport, he insisted on helping me check in, making sure the airline was aware of my medical needs, confirming my prearranged assistance. His attention to detail reminded me of myself, the organized, reliable Emma who had held everything together for so long. Thank you, I said as we reached the security checkpoint, for everything. Just being neighborly, he replied with characteristic understatement. Then more seriously, I'm proud of you, Emma. Not many people would have fought back the way you did. Not many would have won. His words stayed with me as I made my way through security, as I settled into my pre-boarded seat on the plane, as I watched Portland disappear beneath clouds. I had fought back. I had won. Not just the legal battle or professional recognition, but something more fundamental. I had reclaimed my voice, my agency, my belief in my own worth. The flight attendant offered me a beverage, checking that I was comfortable, responding to the requires assistance note on my ticket with respectful attention rather than pity. I accepted water, needing to stay hydrated for my health, and turned to watch the clouds outside my window. Somewhere below, Marcus and Vanessa were rebuilding their lives without the golden opportunity they had tried to steal. Somewhere ahead, a production team was preparing to transform my words into images, my imagination into reality. And I was suspended between these two truths, moving forward while carrying the past. Not as a burden now, but as context, as part of a story still unfolding. As the plane banked south toward Los Angeles, I opened my notebook and began to write. Not scene directions or character notes for Portland Rain, but something new, the beginning of another story, one about healing and reclamation, about the complicated nature of family and forgiveness. Fiction, but seeded with truths I was only now beginning to understand. By the time the captain announced our descent into Los Angeles, I had filled several pages. The creative flow felt different now, less desperate, less hidden. This wasn't writing stolen from other obligations or squeezed between supporting others. This was writing as its own priority, given the space and respect it deserved. When we landed, a studio representative was waiting at the gate, a young woman with a tablet and a sign bearing my name. "Ms. Wilson, I'm Tasha. The car is ready whenever you are." The treatment was professional, courteous, exactly how I would have been greeted if I had been recognized as the screenwriter from the beginning. Not special treatment, just appropriate acknowledgement of my role and consideration for my health needs. As we made our way through the airport, Tasha briefed me on the schedule for the next few days. The production office has adjusted everything per Ms. Reynolds' instructions. Shorter meetings with breaks in between, accommodations within, walking distance of the main facilities. "That's very thoughtful," I said, touched by the consideration. "Ms. Reynolds was very specific about making this work for you," Tasha replied with a smile. "She said your voice was essential to the project." Essential. The word echoed as we emerged into the bright California sunshine. After so long being overlooked, undervalued, taken for granted, I was essential. The hotel was beautiful but not ostentatious, the kind of place that signaled respect without excess. My room was already prepared despite the early hour, with a welcome basket containing tea, snacks appropriate for my dietary needs, and a handwritten note from Diane. "Welcome to the next chapter. So glad you're here to write it with us." I unpacked carefully, arranged my medications on the bathroom counter, and stood by the window looking out at palm trees swaying in the breeze, so different from the evergreens of home. This wasn't a permanent move, just a working visit, but it represented something profound, a door opening rather than closing. My phone buzzed with a message from Amara. "Landed safely. Remember to rest before meetings. Doctor's orders." I smiled at her characteristic blend of friendship and medical advice. "Safely here. Hotel is perfect. Taking it slow today, promise." Another message came through as I was responding. This one from Marcus. "Good luck in LA. They're lucky to have the real writer on board." I stared at his text, unsure how to feel about this new, supportive version of my brother. Was it genuine growth or just another performance? Time would tell, I supposed. For now, I simply replied, "Thank you." Setting my phone aside, I stretched carefully, mindful of my body's signals. There would be time for meetings tomorrow, for creative discussions and production decisions. Today was for acclimating, for recognizing this moment for what it was. Not just a professional opportunity, but a personal threshold. I had arrived in Los Angeles not as Marcus Wilson's forgotten sister, not as the woman left behind in Portland, but as Emma Wilson, screenwriter, creator, essential voice. The betrayal had nearly broken me. The illness had changed me permanently. But standing in this room, with my screenplay about to become a film and new words flowing from my pen, I realized that sometimes being broken and changed creates space for becoming more fully yourself. My phone rang, Diane Reynolds calling, to welcome me personally. As I answered, I caught my reflection in the mirror, still thin from illness, still bearing the subtle marks of lupus, but standing straight, eyes clear and focused. "Emma," Diane's warm voice came through the speaker. "Welcome to Los Angeles. Are you ready to see your story come to life?" I smiled at my reflection, at the woman who had fought her way here against odds that once seemed insurmountable. "Yes," I said simply. "I'm ready." The production office of Pacific Films occupied 3 floors of a renovated industrial building in Burbank, all exposed brick and high ceilings with natural light streaming through massive windows. As Tasha guided me through the main entrance, I felt a momentary flutter of imposter syndrome. This was the real Hollywood, not the glamorous public face, but the working heart where movies were actually made. And I was here not as an observer, but as a key creative voice. "The morning meeting is in the story room," Tasha explained, leading me down a corridor decorated with framed movie posters from the studio's previous successes. It's just the core creative team today. Diane, the director, the production designer, and the casting director. Small mercies. I'd been bracing myself for a crowded conference room full of executives and assistants scribbling notes. This sounded more intimate, more focused on the creative elements I cared about most. The story room turned out to be a comfortable space with a large wooden table at its center, walls covered in corkboards displaying location photos, character mood boards, and, most surreally, pages from my screenplay, enlarged and annotated, with production notes. Seeing my words given this treatment sent a jolt of validation through me. Diane Reynolds rose immediately when I entered, coming forward to greet me with a firm handshake. "Emma, welcome. How was the flight? The hotel working out?" "Both perfect, thank you," I said, genuinely appreciative of the care that had gone into the arrangements. "I'm still processing all of this." She smiled knowingly. "The first time seeing your work in pre-production is always a bit overwhelming. Take your time. We're here to collaborate, not to rush you." She introduced me to the others already seated around the table. Gabriel Torres, the director, a thoughtful-looking man in his 40s with salt and pepper beard and intense eyes. Sarah Lau, production designer, whose casual outfit belied the precise sketches spread before her, and Damon Williams, casting director, who greeted me with particular enthusiasm. "Your characters are so vivid on the page," Damon said. "Makes my job both easier and harder. Easier because I know exactly who I'm looking for. Harder because the bar is set so high." His compliment warmed me. These were industry professionals who had worked on major films, and they were treating my screenplay with genuine respect. Not as Marcus's work they were forced to attribute to me, but as something they valued on its own merits. "We've prepared an overview of where we are in the process," Diane said, sliding a folder toward me as I took a seat. "But before we dive into specifics, I'd like to hear from you. What elements of your screenplay feel most essential to preserve as we move into production?" The question caught me off guard. In my years as an editor working with directors and producers, I'd rarely heard a writer's vision prioritized so explicitly. Typically, by this stage, the focus was on practical concerns, budget, scheduling, marketability, with the original creative intent often an afterthought. "The relationship between the siblings," I said after a moment's reflection. "The way they love each other but can't seem to communicate that love effectively. And Portland itself, the atmosphere, the rain, the way it shapes the characters' emotional landscape." Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. "The city as another character. Yes, that comes through strongly in your writing. We're committed to shooting on location for all the exterior scenes." "Actually," Sarah interjected, "we've already started location scouting. I have some preliminary photos." She passed a tablet to me, displaying images of rain-slicked streets, moody coffee shops, the iconic view of Matt Hood from the city, all locations I recognized, all places that had informed my writing. "These are perfect," I said, genuinely, moved by how closely they matched my vision. "You've captured exactly the Portland I was writing about." The meeting continued for 2 hours, during which I found myself not just passively approving their plans, but actively contributing. They asked thoughtful questions about character motivations, thematic elements, specific scene settings. They took notes when I elaborated on backstory that hadn't made it explicitly into the screenplay but informed the characters' actions. When Diane called for a break, I realized I had been so engaged that I'd neglected to monitor my energy levels, a crucial aspect of managing my condition. I discreetly took my medication with water, noting that Gabriel had arranged for the windows to be opened slightly, bringing fresh air into the room without my having to ask. "We have lunch set up in the adjoining room," Diane informed me. "Nothing fancy, but we made sure to include options compatible with your dietary needs." Again, the thoughtfulness surprised me. They had done their homework, considered my health requirements without making them a focus or a burden. This was respect manifested in practical ways, exactly what Marcus and Vanessa had failed to provide during my illness. Over lunch, our conversation shifted from the practical to the personal, with Gabriel asking about my background in film editing and how it informed my writing. Editing taught me to be ruthless about what's necessary, I explained, to recognize when a scene is serving the story or just serving the writer's ego. That explains the economy in your screenplay, he observed. There's no wasted space. Every scene pulls double or triple duty for character, plot, and theme. High praise from Gabriel, Diane commented with a smile. He usually complains that screenplays are bloated with unnecessary dialogue. The easy camaraderie among these professionals and their willingness to include me in it created a sense of belonging I hadn't expected. This wasn't charity or pity. They genuinely valued what I brought to the project. After lunch, Damon presented the casting shortlist for the lead roles, the siblings at the heart of my story. The actors being considered were all talented performers I respected, some with significant name recognition. Seeing their headshots alongside character descriptions from my screenplay made the project feel suddenly, thrillingly real. We'd like your input on the final casting decisions, Damon explained. Especially for the sister role. She's complex, vulnerable, but resilient, creative, but practical. The emotional center of the story. The role I had written drawing from my own experiences, though fictionalized and transformed through the alchemy of storytelling. I trust your expertise, I said, genuinely meaning it. But I appreciate being involved in the process. By late afternoon, my energy was flagging noticeably. Diane, observant as ever, called the meeting to a close before I had to request it. We've covered the essentials for today, she said. Emma, we've arranged a car to take you back to the hotel. Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it, we'd like to show you some of the costume and set design concepts. In the car back to the hotel, I found myself in a state of quiet amazement. The day had unfolded with such respect for both my creative work and my physical limitations. No one had questioned my authority or expertise. No one had treated my health considerations as an inconvenience. I was being valued for my mind, my vision, my words, exactly as it should have been from the beginning. Back in my hotel room, I called Amara with an update. They've thought of everything, I told her. The meeting schedule, the breaks, even the food options. As they should, she replied, characteristically matter of fact. How are you feeling? Physically, I mean. Tired, but good tired. Like I've used my energy for something worthwhile. That's the best kind of tired, she agreed. Just don't overdo it. Your body is still healing. After we hung up, I settled on the balcony with my notebook, inspired to work on my new project despite the full day. The creative energy flowing through me felt different from before. Less desperate, less secretive. This was writing done in the open, with confidence that it would find its audience. A text from Noah arrived just as I was finishing a scene outline. How was the first day among the Hollywood elite? I smiled at his phrasing. Less elite, more hardworking creatives. They actually care about the story. As they should, he replied. It's an excellent story by an excellent writer. His simple affirmation warmed me. Noah had been one of the first people to read Portland Rain, offering thoughtful feedback without ever suggesting he knew better than I did. A refreshing contrast to Marcus's backhanded compliments and Vanessa's polite disinterest. Another message arrived, this one from Vanessa. Zoe can't wait to see you Sunday. She's made you something. The thought of my niece creating something for me brought a lump to my throat. Despite everything that had happened between the adults, Zoe's affection remained pure and uncomplicated. She had been an innocent bystander in the adults' betrayals and ambitions. I replied, looking forward to it. Tell her I've missed her terribly. It was true. Of all the losses I'd experienced when Marcus and Vanessa left for Hollywood, Zoe's daily presence in my life had been the most painful. The house had felt emptier without her curious questions, her impromptu dance performances, in the living room, her habit of leaving drawings for me to find in unexpected places. The remainder of my time in Los Angeles unfolded with the same blend of professional respect and practical consideration. Each day brought new aspects of the production into focus: costume designs that captured the characters' personalities, set decoration details that reflected the Portland aesthetic, music choices that complemented the emotional tone of key scenes. Throughout it all, my role remained central. My opinions were solicited, considered, often implemented. When changes were necessary for production reasons, they were explained clearly and alternatives discussed collaboratively. This was how the creative process should work: not exploitation, but true partnership. On my final evening in Los Angeles, Diane hosted a small dinner at her home in the hills, just the core creative team in a relaxed setting. As we sat on her terrace overlooking the city lights, Gabriel raised a toast. "To Emma Wilson," he said, glass held high, "whose words gave us all jobs." The group laughed appreciatively, but the sentiment behind the humor was genuine. My screenplay had created this project, these opportunities. My vision was being respected and expanded upon, not erased or diminished. Later, as the evening wound down, Diane walked me to the car that would take me back to the hotel. "You should be proud," she said quietly. "Not just of the screenplay, but of how you've handled everything. The theft, the recovery, this week. A lot of writers would have been bitter or defensive. You've been collaborative and gracious." Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't thought of my approach as particularly noteworthy. "I've spent years working with directors and producers as an editor," I explained. "I understand the collaborative nature of filmmaking." "That experience shows," she agreed. "But there's something else, a fundamental generosity of spirit that can't be taught. That's what makes your writing special, too." I considered her observation on the drive back to the hotel. Was it generosity that had allowed me to work effectively with the team? Or was it simply the relief of being properly acknowledged, properly valued after years of the opposite? Perhaps it was both. The professional experience that had taught me how films actually get made, combined with the personal journey that had shown me the importance of standing up for my own worth. I had fought to have my voice heard, and now that it was, I could afford to listen to others as well. The flight back to Portland the next morning felt like crossing a threshold. I was returning home changed, not just by the industry validation or the exciting developments with the film, but by the experience of being taken seriously, of having my needs accommodated as a matter of course rather than as special favors. Noah met me at the airport, his familiar Volvo a welcome sight after the sleek black town cars of Los Angeles. "Welcome back to the rain," he greeted me, taking my bag. "How was your Hollywood adventure?" "Remarkably un-Hollywood," I replied as we walked to the parking garage. "More like creative problem-solving with smart people who respect each other." "The dream scenario," he observed. "And you're part of it." "I am," I agreed, still somewhat amazed by this reality. "But I'm glad to be home." And I was, for all the excitement of the production process. Portland was where I belonged, in the gentle rain, the familiar neighborhoods, the house that was now entirely mine. Not just because of history or habit, but because this place had shaped me, informed my creativity, supported my recovery. The house felt welcoming when we arrived, not empty as I had feared. During my absence, Noah had arranged for a cleaning service to visit, and Amara had dropped off fresh flowers for the living room and groceries for the refrigerator. Small gestures that transformed a space from merely personal property to a true home. "You should rest," Noah advised as he set my suitcase in the bedroom. "Big day tomorrow with Zoe's visit." He was right. The trip, while exhilarating, had taxed my still-recovering body. I needed to pace myself to ensure I had energy for what promised to be an emotionally complex reunion with my niece. I slept deeply that night, in my own bed with the familiar sound of rain against the windows. When morning came, I felt refreshed in a way the luxury hotel hadn't managed. There was comfort in the known, in belonging fully to a place. The text from Vanessa came mid-morning. "We'll bring Zoe by around 2 p.m. if that still works. She's bouncing off the walls with excitement." "Perfect," I replied. "I've got cookies in the oven." It wasn't strictly true yet, but it would be. Zoe and I had always baked together, creating increasingly elaborate cookie designs while having our best conversations. I wanted to recreate that connection, to show her that some things hadn't changed despite the adults' complications. By the time the doorbell rang at precisely 2 p.m., the house smelled of vanilla and cinnamon, and I had arranged Zoe's favorite art supplies on the kitchen table. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Zoe stood on the porch, physically changed in the month since I'd seen her. At nearly 10, she was taller, her face losing some of its childish roundness. But her eyes were the same, bright, curious, full of life, and the way she launched herself into my arms hadn't changed at all. "Auntie Em!" she exclaimed, hugging me fiercely. "I missed you so much." I held her close, emotions overwhelming me momentarily. "I missed you too, sweetie, every single day." Behind her, Marcus and Vanessa stood awkwardly on the porch steps, uncertainty evident in their posture. They looked different from our cafe meeting, less polished, more authentic somehow. Marcus in a simple flannel shirt rather than his cultivated, creative professional look, Vanessa with her hair pulled back casually, minimal makeup. "Would you like to come in?" I offered, surprising myself with the genuine invitation. "There are plenty of cookies." They exchanged a glance, clearly having expected to simply drop Zoe off. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked. "Yes," I said simply. "Come in." The dynamic in the house was strange at first, the three adults hyper-aware of our complicated history, Zoe oblivious as she chattered about her time in Seattle, her new school in Portland, the friends she missed in Los Angeles. I served cookies and tea, falling into familiar hosting patterns despite everything. "Your house looks different," Zoe observed, looking around the living room. "I rearranged some things," I explained. What I didn't say was that I'd reclaimed spaces that had been dominated by Marcus and Vanessa's tastes, redecorated to reflect my own aesthetic now that the house was truly mine. "I like it," she declared with a child's straightforward approval. "Can I see if my art is still on the fridge?" "Of course," I said, leading her to the kitchen while Marcus and Vanessa remained in the living room, examining the subtle changes, with more complicated emotions. In the kitchen, Zoe's face lit up at the sight of her drawings still displayed prominently. "You kept them." "Of course I did," I said. "They're important to me." She opened her backpack and removed a carefully rolled paper secured with a ribbon. "I made this for you. At art class." The drawing showed two figures sitting at a table, paintbrushes in hand. The larger figure had my curly hair, the smaller was clearly Zoe. Above them, in careful letters, "Me and Auntie Em making art together." "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely moved. "We should frame it." "Can we do art now?" she asked eagerly. "Mom and Dad said we could stay all afternoon if you're not too tired." The consideration in that last phrase caught me by surprise. Someone, Marcus or Vanessa, had prepared Zoe for the possibility that my health might limit our activities. It was a small thing, but it represented awareness they hadn't demonstrated before. "I'm not too tired at all," I assured her. "Everything's set up at the table." We spent the next hour working side by side with watercolors, Zoe updating me on her life with the unfiltered honesty of childhood. She described Seattle, rainy but with cool buildings, her new school in Portland, Okay, but she didn't have best friends yet. And her brief time at the performing arts school in LA. Fun, but the teachers were super strict. Dad's been sad, she said suddenly, concentrating on her painting. He cries sometimes when he thinks I'm sleeping. The observation pierced me. Children notice everything, process it in their own way. Growing up is complicated sometimes, I said carefully. Your dad is figuring some things out. She nodded seriously. Mom says he made a big mistake and now he has to fix it. Is that why we left Hollywood? Because of Dad's mistake? How to answer this? I glanced toward the living room where Marcus and Vanessa were still sitting, their murmured conversation inaudible from the kitchen. Yes, I said finally, choosing honesty without bitterness. Your dad made a mistake, and now things are different. But that doesn't mean they can't be good different eventually. She considered this thoughtfully. Like when I messed up my science project and had to start over? But the second one was actually better? Something like that, I agreed, touched by her simple wisdom. Sometimes starting over leads to better things. I'm glad we're back in Portland, she confided. I missed you, and the house, and my old school, even though I can't go back there yet. The acknowledgement that Portland, and by extension me, was a place of comfort and security for her eased something in my heart. Whatever happened with Marcus and Vanessa, my connection with Zoe could remain intact, perhaps even grow stronger through these changes. When we returned to the living room with our finished paintings, the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Marcus and Vanessa seemed more relaxed, less guarded. They admired Zoe's artwork with genuine enthusiasm. Then Marcus turned to me. Emma, we've been talking about what happens next, he began hesitantly. We've found an apartment not far from here. Small, but decent. I've got a job interview at the community theater next week. Nothing glamorous, just administrative work, but it's a start. That's good, I said, meaning it. There was something right about Marcus returning to community theater, where his love of performance had begun, before ambition and opportunism corrupted it. We were wondering, Vanessa added, her voice carefully neutral, if you might be open to Zoe spending time here occasionally. After school sometimes, or weekends when you're feeling up to it. She misses this place. Misses you. I looked at Zoe, who was watching the adults with hopeful eyes, then back at Marcus and Vanessa. They weren't asking for themselves, not for forgiveness or reconciliation, not yet. They were asking for Zoe, putting her needs ahead of their pride or discomfort. I'd like that, I said. Very much. Zoe's face brightened immediately. Can I still have my special drawer in the craft cabinet? It's still there, I assured her. Nothing's changed. But of course everything had changed. And yet, perhaps not the things that mattered most. The bonds of family, complicated as they were, the sanctuary of creative expression, the possibility of beginning again with better understanding. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself observing Marcus with new eyes. The Hollywood veneer was gone completely, replaced by something more authentic, humility, perhaps, or simply the relief of no longer maintaining a false front. He helped Zoe clean her paintbrushes with the patient attention he'd always shown for her, one aspect of him that had remained genuine through everything. The movie starts filming next month, I mentioned as we all sat in the kitchen, enjoying a second round of cookies. They're doing all the Portland exteriors first, then moving to the studio for interiors. That's wonderful, Vanessa said, her enthusiasm seeming genuine. Your screenplay deserves to be made properly. Marcus nodded. Agreement, but didn't speak. Emotion visible in his expression. This was difficult for him, hearing about the project that might have launched his acting career if he hadn't tried to claim authorship fraudulently. Zoe, oblivious to the undercurrents, asked excitedly, Will there be famous actors? Will we get to meet them? There will be, I confirmed. And yes, you can meet them when they're filming here. I've already arranged for a set visit. Her eyes widened with delight. Really? For real? For real, I promised. The director specifically said to bring my niece who loves movies. I hadn't planned this revelation, but seeing Zoe's excitement and Marcus and Vanessa's surprise made me glad I'd mentioned it. This was something I could offer, not to erase the past, but to create a new memory, a positive association with the creative work that had once come between us. Thank you, Marcus said quietly. You didn't have to include us in any of this. I'm not doing it for you, I clarified gently. I'm doing it for Zoe, and for me. Because sharing creativity is what matters, not who gets the credit. The irony of this statement in light of what had happened wasn't lost on any of us adults. Marcus winced slightly but nodded understanding. As the visit drew to a close, I felt a curious mixture of emotions. The lingering hurt of betrayal, yes, but also unexpected moments of the easy familiarity we had once shared as a family unit. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first, tentative steps toward something new. At the door, Zoe hugged me with fierce affection. Can I come back tomorrow? Let's start with next weekend, Vanessa suggested before I could answer. Auntie M needs her rest, remember? Making a movie is big work. The consideration in her response, putting my needs into the equation without prompting, registered as significant. Whether from genuine growth or simply hard lessons learned, Vanessa was displaying awareness she'd previously lacked. Next weekend would be perfect, I agreed. We can start planning our movie set adventure. As they walked to their car, a modest used sedan that had replaced the luxury vehicle they'd leased in Los Angeles, I noticed how Marcus placed a protective hand on Zoe's shoulder, how Vanessa carried the artwork with careful attention. They were trying, in their way, to rebuild from the ground up. Watching them drive away, I realized something important. I didn't need or want their life to be difficult as punishment for what they'd done. I simply needed my own life to be valued properly, my work recognized, my needs respected, my boundaries honored. And remarkably, that seemed to be happening now, on multiple fronts. I closed the door and returned to the kitchen, where evidence of our afternoon together remained. Paintbrushes drying by the sink, cookie crumbs on plates, Zoe's new drawing waiting to be framed. The house felt different somehow. Not empty as it had in those first difficult months, but peaceful. Mine, but with space for connections that mattered. My phone buzzed with a message from Diane. Casting final decisions made. Attached approved. List. All your preferred choices secured. Filming schedule confirmed. Portland exteriors begin April 12th. We'll send detailed production calendar tomorrow. Another threshold crossed. Another step toward seeing my creative vision realized properly. I saved the document to review later, then texted Amara. Zoe visited. It went well. Better than expected. Having dinner tonight? Already planned, came her swift reply. Noah's making his famous lasagna. We'll be there at 7. Rest until then. I smiled at her ongoing care, the way she balanced medical concern with friendship. As I cleared the kitchen table and loaded the dishwasher, I reflected on how different recovery looked now compared to those first desperate weeks after the hospital. Then, it had been a solitary battle, marked by abandonment and betrayal. Now, it was supported by a community of my choosing, Amara with her fierce loyalty, Noah with his steady presence, even Diane with her professional respect from afar, and perhaps, in some new configuration yet to be fully determined, Marcus, Vanessa, and especially Zoe might be part of that community too. Not as they had been before. That relationship was gone, transformed irrevocably by what had happened. But something new might grow in its place, something with clearer boundaries and more honest foundations. I moved to the sunroom where my laptop waited, inspired to capture these thoughts in my new writing project. The story was taking shape, not a screenplay this time, but a novel about family, creativity, betrayal, and the complicated path to redemption. Fiction, but informed by lived experience, transformed through the alchemy of creative vision. As I wrote, the familiar sound of Portland rain began against the windows, gentle at first, then steadier. The sound that had inspired Portland rain, that had shaped my aesthetic sensibility, that had accompanied both my deepest struggles and most meaningful recoveries. I paused, looking out at the garden where droplets collected on maple leaves and flower petals. In Los Angeles, everyone had spoken about the rain in my screenplay as metaphor, for tears, for cleansing, for renewal. But here in Portland, rain wasn't just metaphor. It was the constant companion, the actual physical presence that shaped daily life and long-term identity. Both perspectives were valid, I realized. The literary interpretation and the lived experience, the universal themes and the specific details. I had fought to have my voice recognized, to have my work attributed properly. But the true value wasn't in my name on the credits. It was in the authenticity of what I had created, the truth it contained. My phone chimed with another message, this one from Marcus. Thank you for today. It meant everything to Zoe, and to us. Simple words that acknowledged a complex reality, not asking for more than I was ready to give, not presuming forgiveness had been granted, just expressing gratitude for the specific moment we had shared. I replied with equal simplicity. She's welcome anytime. We'll talk more soon. Outside, the rain continued, nourishing the garden, cleaning the air, connecting this moment to all the moments that had come before, the difficult ones and the joyful ones alike. I returned to my writing, fingers moving steadily across the keyboard, giving form to my experiences not to dwell in the past, but to transmute it into something meaningful for the future. By the time Noah and Amara arrived for dinner, bringing warm lasagna and bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider, I had completed 3 new chapters. When they asked how I was feeling after the emotionally complex day, I considered the question carefully. Whole, I said finally. I feel whole. Spring arrived in Portland with its characteristic explosion of color, cherry blossoms lining residential streets, daffodils pushing through still damp soil, maple trees unfurling tender green leaves. The season of renewal seemed particularly fitting as production crews began arriving in the city, transforming ordinary locations into film sets for Portland rain. I stood at the edge of Laurelhurst Park, watching as lighting technicians adjusted equipment and production assistants consulted clipboards. Gabriel Torres, the director, was gesturing animatedly as he discussed a shot with the cinematographer, both of them focused on capturing the particular quality of light filtering through the trees. Surreal, isn't it? Diane Reynolds appeared, beside me, coffee cup in hand. Seeing your words become an actual physical production? I keep thinking I'll wake up, I admitted, like this is all some elaborate dream my mind created during those weeks in the hospital. She smiled, understanding in her eyes. That's how it feels for every first-time screenwriter. But trust me, this is very real. 65 crew members, and a significant budget don't materialize from dreams. We watched as the actors playing the siblings at the heart of my story rehearsed their movements through the park path. Eliza Chen and Thomas Mercer had been my first choices for the roles, both capable of conveying the complicated love and resentment between the characters, both bringing nuances I hadn't even explicitly written, but had somehow sensed in the characters. They're embodying it perfectly, I observed. The way Thomas holds himself slightly apart, the way Eliza watches him when he isn't looking. That's the magic of good casting combined with excellent writing, Diane said. They have real material to work with, real psychological depth to explore. A production assistant approached, clipboard extended. Ms. Wilson, we're ready for you. The director wants your input on the dialogue in the confrontation scene. This was still new. being consulted not as an afterthought but as an essential creative voice. Gabriel had established early in the process that I would be present for key scenes, especially those heavy with emotional resonance. The emotional. Truth is in Emma's writing, he had told the cast during their first table read. When in doubt, that's our compass. As I made my way toward the center of the activity, I caught sight of a familiar figure at the edge of the cordoned-off area. Noah, watching the proceedings with barely disguised delight. I'd arranged for him to visit the set today, knowing how much the retired literature professor would enjoy seeing the adaptation process firsthand. "This is quite something," he said when I joined him briefly. "From words on a page to all this." He gestured at the controlled chaos of the film set. "It takes a village," I agreed. "Many villages, actually." "They need you," he pointed out as the production assistant approached again with barely concealed impatience. "Go be brilliant. I'll just watch from here with my complimentary coffee." He held up a cup emblazoned with the production company's logo. The morning unfolded in a rhythm that had become increasingly familiar over the past week of shooting, periods of intense focus interrupted by long stretches of technical adjustments, weather considerations, and the thousand small details that went into capturing a single scene. Through it all, I found myself oscillating between creative engagement and quiet observation, still adjusting to my role in this elaborate process. During a break in filming, my phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. "Zoe's school project. On someone I admire is definitely about you. She keeps asking me how to spell perseverance. Thought you'd want to know." A warm glow spread through my chest at the thought of Zoe working earnestly on a project about me. Our weekend visits had become a cherished routine over the past month. Baking sessions, art projects, occasional outings to the park when my energy permitted. Through her eyes, I wasn't defined by illness or betrayal, but by creativity and resilience. I texted back, "Tell her it's PERSEVERANCE, and that I'm honored." Vanessa's reply came quickly. She also wants to know if she can interview you officially with her recorder. "Of course," I responded. "Maybe this Saturday?" Our exchanges remained primarily focused on Zoe, but a careful civility had developed between us. Not friendship exactly, but a functional communication channel built on our shared care for a child who needed stability amid the adult's complicated relationships. With Marcus, things were both simpler and more complex. He had found work at the community theater as he'd hoped, not acting initially, but handling administrative tasks and eventually assistant directing a youth production. We spoke rarely and briefly, usually during the handoffs of Zoe's visits. The weight of what had happened remained between us, neither fully addressed nor completely ignored. "Emma," Gabriel called from across the set. "Can you look at this dialogue revision? Thomas feels it's not landing right." I tucked my phone away and returned to the present moment, to the creative work that had somehow survived theft, illness, and betrayal to become this living, breathing production. The day's filming extended into early evening as Gabriel sought to capture the perfect quality of fading light through rain-slicked branches. By the time we wrapped, I was exhausted but exhilarated. Noah had left hours earlier with a promise to return another day, and most of the crew was now efficiently packing equipment and preparing for tomorrow's location. "You should rest tomorrow," Diane advised as we walked toward the production vehicles. "We're just doing technical setups at the river location. Nothing that requires your specific input." "I might take you up on that," I admitted. "My body's still learning its new limits." She nodded understanding. "That's the thing about recovery. It's never a straight line. 2 steps forward, 1 step back." "Exactly," I agreed, touched by her insight. Diane had become more than just a professional collaborator over these weeks. She'd become something of a mentor, offering guidance not just on the film industry, but on navigating complex transitions more generally. "Oh, before I forget," she said, reaching into her bag. "The first promotional materials are ready for your approval." She handed me a folder containing preliminary poster designs and draft press releases. There, at the top of each document, were the words I had once feared I'd never see. Screenplay by Emma Wilson. "We're focusing the early publicity on the authentic Portland locations and the emotional depth of the sibling relationship," Diane explained. "Critics are already interested based on the casting and your unique backstory." My unique backstory. A polite industry term for writer who had her work stolen by her brother and fought to reclaim it. Diane had been careful about how this narrative would be handled in the press, protecting the film from negative associations while ensuring my authorship was properly recognized. "Do I need to talk about everything?" I asked, the question that had been lingering in my mind as the reality of press obligations approached. Diane understood immediately. "You get to control your own story, Emma. We've prepared a simple statement acknowledging there was a misattribution of authorship that's been corrected. Beyond that, it's up to you how much to share about the personal aspects." The consideration in her approach reflected everything I'd come to appreciate about working with her. The balance of professional pragmatism with genuine respect for individuals' boundaries. Back at my house that evening, I sat in the sunroom with the production materials spread before me, still marveling at seeing my name in official capacity. My phone rang, Amara calling after her hospital shift. "How was filming today?" she asked, the sounds of the hospital parking garage audible in the background. "Exhausting but wonderful," I replied honestly. "I'm learning to pace myself better." "Good. Because I'm not above showing up on set with my stethoscope if you're overdoing it," she threatened, only half joking. "Any word from Marcus and Vanessa?" "Just about Zoe's school project. She's doing a presentation about me, apparently." Amara's laugh was warm through the phone. "Of course she is. You're basically a superhero in her eyes. You write movies and stand up to bullies." "I wish it were that simple," I said, thinking of the complicated reality beneath Zoe's admiring perspective. "Maybe it is that simple to her," Amara suggested. "Children have a way of cutting through the adult complications to the essential truth." After we hung up, I considered her words while preparing a light dinner. Perhaps there was wisdom in Zoe's straightforward view, not because it ignored the complexities, but because it focused on what ultimately mattered: courage, creativity, and the choice to stand up for oneself. The next day, taking Diane's advice, I stayed home from the Yara set. My body thanked me for the respite, the joint pain that had been building subsiding with rest and careful medication. I used the quiet hours to work on my novel, the writing flowing more easily than it had in weeks. Around noon, an unexpected text arrived from Marcus. "Community Theater is producing a new play next season. Director asked if I knew any screenwriters who might want to adapt it for local film festival. Thought of you. No pressure." I stared at the message, surprised by the professional referral. This wasn't Marcus asking for forgiveness or trying to insert himself back into my creative life. It was a straightforward professional connection, the kind colleagues might share, a recognition of my skills separate from our personal history. "I'd be interested in learning more," I replied after careful consideration. "Can forward details?" "When you have them." His response was equally professional. "Will do. Thanks." This neutral exchange felt like a small but significant shift, not reconciliation exactly, but a tentative step toward some new form of relationship built on mutual respect, rather than the unbalanced dynamic of before. Saturday arrived with unusually clear skies for spring in Portland. I prepared for Zoe's visit with particular care, setting up the kitchen table for her official interview with snacks and her favorite art supplies for afterward. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to find not just Zoe but Marcus as well, looking slightly uncomfortable on my porch. "Dad's going to pick me up later," Zoe explained as she bounded inside, recorder already in hand. "Mom has a job interview." This was news. Vanessa actively seeking employment. Another sign of them rebuilding their lives on more solid, less fantasy-driven foundations. Good luck to her, I said sincerely, then addressed Marcus. Would you like to come in for coffee when you return? Zoe and I should be finished with her project by then. The invitation surprised him visibly. Yes, that would be nice. Thank you. After he left, Zoe set up her interview station, with the seriousness of a professional journalist, arranging her questions in order and testing her recorder multiple times. Ready, Auntie M? She asked, finger poised over the record button. Ready, I confirmed, charmed by her earnestness. What followed was 30 minutes of questions that ranged from the expected, "What do you like about being a writer?" to the surprisingly insightful, "Was it scary to stand up to Dad when he took your movie?" I answered carefully, conscious of talking to a child about adult matters while still honoring the truth. It was scary, I acknowledged in response to her direct question. Standing up for yourself often is, especially when it involves people you care about, but being scared doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. She nodded seriously, then asked, "Are you still mad at Dad?" The question cut through pretense in that way children's questions often do. I was very angry, I admitted, and hurt. But feelings change over time, especially when people try to make things right. Your dad is trying to do better now. He cried when we had to leave Hollywood, she confided, momentarily forgetting her interviewer role. Not because of the movie stuff, but because he said he messed up our family. The observation pierced me. Through all my justified anger at Marcus, I had sometimes forgotten that his actions had cost him things he valued too. Not just opportunities and status, but family connections and self-respect. Families are complicated, I said gently. Sometimes they change shape, but that doesn't mean they're broken forever. She considered this thoughtfully, then declared our interview complete and switched to art mode, creating elaborate illustrations for her presentation while I prepared lunch. When Marcus returned in the afternoon, Zoe proudly showed him her project in progress, complete with drawings of me at my computer, me on the movie set, and a surprisingly detailed depiction of me in the hospital getting strong again, as she put it. "This is really good work, Zoe," he said, his pride in her evident. "Ms. Johnson will be impressed." While Zoe continued coloring, Marcus and I moved to the kitchen with our coffee, the first time we'd sat together in my home since before. The betrayal. The silence between us was weighted with unspoken history. "The movie looks amazing," he said finally. "I drove past the set at the river yesterday. Quite an operation." "It's been an education," I agreed. Different from seeing it from the editing side. Another silence, less uncomfortable but still tentative. "Emma," he began, then paused to gather his thoughts. "I know I've said it before, but I am truly sorry. Not just for taking your screenplay, but for leaving when you were ill, for putting ambition ahead of everything that actually matters." The directness of his apology, offered without audience or agenda, felt different from his previous expressions of remorse. "Why did you do it?" I asked, the question that had lingered beneath all others. Was it just opportunity, or was there something else? He looked down at his coffee, expression troubled. "It wasn't planned. When you were in the hospital, I went through your desk looking for insurance information. Found the screenplay instead. Read it in one sitting." He sighed heavily. "It was so good, Em. So much better than anything I'd written or acted in. And there was this moment where I thought, maybe this is the universe balancing things. You were always the talented one, the smart one, but I was the one who got noticed. So you took it because you thought you deserved recognition more than I did?" My voice remained level, genuinely seeking understanding rather than renewing accusation. "No," he said quickly. "Not exactly. It was more. I convinced myself it could help both of us, that I'd get a foot in the door, then bring you in properly, make it a family success story. He laughed bitterly. I actually believed that narrative for about 5 minutes. Then it became about covering the initial lie, and then another lie, until you were trapped in a fiction of your own making, I finished. He nodded, relief evident that I understood, even if understanding wasn't the same as absolution. The irony is, he continued quietly, I never enjoyed any of it. The meetings, the attention, it was all poisoned because I knew it wasn't mine to claim. I was miserable in LA, even before everything fell apart. This admission surprised me. The image of Marcus triumphantly living the Hollywood dream had been so fixed in my mind. Why did you sign over the house? I asked, changing direction. You could have sold your half, at least had some financial cushion. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply. Because it was always more your home than mine. Because it was the one concrete thing I could actually give back. From the dining room, we could hear Zoe humming to herself as she worked, oblivious to the weight of the conversation happening a room away. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Marcus clarified. I know what I did damaged our relationship in ways that might never fully heal. I just want you to know that I do understand what I destroyed and I regret it every day. I studied my brother, really looked at him beyond my anger and hurt. The Hollywood polish was completely gone now, replaced by something more genuine. Not just remorse, but a hard-earned self-awareness. I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again, I said honestly, but I think I would like to try having some kind of relationship. For Zoe, yes, but also for us. We're still family, however complicated that is now. The relief that washed over his features was profound. That's more than I deserve, he said quietly. It's not about deserving, I replied. It's about choosing a future that isn't defined solely by the past. When Marcus and Zoe left that afternoon, something had shifted subtly. Not a dramatic reconciliation, but the tentative beginning of a new chapter. Not erasing what had happened, but perhaps eventually incorporating it into a larger, more complex story of family, forgiveness, and growth. The final weeks of Portland filming passed in a blur of creative energy balanced with careful attention to my health. I had learned to recognize the early warning signs when my body needed rest, to communicate my limitations clearly without shame or apology. The production team had adjusted accordingly, creating a workflow that respected both my creative contribution and my physical reality. On the last day of Oregon shooting, before the production would move to sound stages in Los Angeles, Gabriel organized a special send-off. The entire cast and crew gathered at sunset on the banks of the Willamette River, one of the key locations from the screenplay. Before we wrap Portland, Gabriel announced, champagne flute raised, I want to thank the person whose vision brought us all here. Emma Wilson wrote a story so authentic, so emotionally true, that it pulled us across state lines to capture it properly. This film exists because she refused to let her voice be silenced. The toast was met with genuine applause from the assembled team. Diane stood beside me, her presence supportive as I navigated this moment of public recognition. Would you like to say anything? She asked quietly. I hadn't prepared remarks, but looking at the faces around me, the actors who had brought my characters to life, the crew who had transformed my words into images, Amara and Noah standing proudly at the edge of the gathering, words came naturally. Thank you all for treating this story with such care, I said, my voice steady and clear. A year ago, I wasn't sure I would ever write again, let alone see my work produced with such respect and creativity. This experience has taught me that sometimes losing what you thought you needed opens the door to something far better than you imagined. The gathering continued as the sun set over the river, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that even the most talented cinematographer couldn't have improved upon. I found myself in conversation with Eliza Chen, the actress playing the sister role. "Your character has been a gift," she told me earnestly. "So many layers to explore, so much unspoken history informing her actions. The scene where she finally confronts her brother about living in his shadow. I've never had dialogue that felt so real." "That means a lot," I said. "Especially since that scene is based on a conversation I never actually had the courage to have in real life." She smiled knowingly. "That's the power of writing, isn't it? Giving voice to the things we can't always say directly." As twilight deepened, Diane approached with news that would once have seemed impossible. "I've just heard from the studio. They want to option your new novel, the one you've been working on during production, based on the first 100 pages alone." "But it's not even finished," I protested, stunned by the offer. "They don't care. They trust your voice now. They're already talking about it as the follow-up project after Portland Rain is released." The validation was profound, not just of the screenplay that had been reclaimed, but of the new work, created from a place of authentic strength rather than hidden insecurity. Later that night, back home in the quiet of my sunroom, I opened my laptop and began writing not the novel, but a letter to Zoe. Not to be given to her now, but years in. The future when she was old enough to understand the full complexity of what had happened between the adults in her life. "Dear Zoe," I wrote, "someday you'll want to know the whole story of the year everything changed. When your parents left for Hollywood and then returned. When I was sick and then got stronger. When the movie that began as a private dream became a shared reality. It's a story about mistakes and consequences, yes, but also about how sometimes losing everything you thought mattered reveals what truly does." The words flowed easily, neither minimizing the betrayal nor magnifying it into the only significant element of a much larger narrative. This was the true power of writing, not just creative expression or professional success, but the ability to make sense of complex human experiences, to find meaning in both suffering and healing. Outside, a gentle spring rain began to fall, droplets catching the moonlight as they traced patterns down the windows. Portland Rain, the constant companion that had named my screenplay, shaped my aesthetic sensibility, witnessed both my deepest struggles and most meaningful recoveries. In the morning, I would call Marcus about that community theater adaptation opportunity. I would finalize travel plans for the Los Angeles phase of production. I would continue work on my novel with the knowledge that it already had a future, beyond my laptop. I would prepare for Zoe's next visit with art supplies and baking ingredients. But for now, in this quiet moment between what had been and what would be, I simply listened to the rain and wrote the truth as I understood it. Imperfect, evolving but authentically mine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.